They say a mother knows when something's wrong. But the truth is, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just feel it, like a quiet ache that never leaves, a whisper in the chest that says, something isn't right. For 2 weeks, my son Daniel hadn't answered my calls. 2 whole weeks. At first, I told myself he was busy. He's an artist. He gets lost in his work. He forgets to eat, to sleep, to call. He's always been that way. But this time felt different. I could feel it in the way my mornings changed. Every day, I'd still make 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for him. It's a habit I never let go of, even after he moved out. I'd stir too much sugar into his cup the way he liked it, and I'd leave it by the kitchen window. I'd watch the steam rise and fade. By the time the cup went cold, I'd realized he still hadn't called. I started hearing things too, not voices, not really, but sounds from memory. The echo of his laughter in the hallway, the clatter of his boots by the door. The kind of sounds that live only in a mother's heart long after the world goes quiet. By the 10th day, I stopped pretending. I called him again and again, each ring cutting deeper than the last. It was like calling into a tunnel that swallowed every sound. By the 14th day, something inside me broke. I woke up before dawn, the house still dark, and I saw his cup sitting by the window, untouched, cold, forgotten. I don't remember crying, but the tears were already there. I took my car keys. I didn't care if it was raining or if it was foolish to go alone. I had to see him. Not because I was afraid something had happened, but because I was afraid something hadn't. Because silence is worse than bad news. At least bad news gives you something to hold. Silence gives you nothing but the sound of your own heart breaking. So I drove, not to visit my son, but to find him. And if I had known what waited inside that house, the things I would see, and the sound that would come from under his bed that night, I might never have gone. But I did. And that's where it all began.
My name is Margaret Hale, but most people just call me Maggie. I'm 68 years old, a widow, a retired school teacher, and the mother of one beautiful boy, Daniel. He's all I have left in this world. And maybe that's why, when he stopped answering my calls, something inside me wouldn't rest. A mother's heart doesn't need proof. It just knows. That morning, I didn't plan to go. I just woke before sunrise, saw his untouched coffee cup on the table, and knew I couldn't sit there another day waiting for silence. So I took my keys, wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, and started driving. The road to Daniel's house cut through the forest, thick with fog that clung to the windshield like breath. Everything looked ghostly. The trees, the houses, even the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Once or twice, I thought I saw movement in the mist. A figure by the trees, maybe. But when I blinked, it was gone. And when I finally reached his street, there it was. His house, still and gray. No lights, no sound. Just that heavy silence waiting for me to break it. When I stepped out of the car, the air felt colder than it should have. The fog was lifting now, but it left behind a silence that pressed against my ears. Even the birds had gone quiet. Daniel's house stood at the end of the street, the paint peeling a little, the porch light broken. I remembered how he promised he'd fix it last winter. He never did. Little things like that stayed frozen in time, like pieces of a life paused mid-breath. I walked up the path slowly, each step louder than I meant it to be. The gravel crunched under my shoes. My heart pounded in my chest so hard it almost hurt. I knocked once, then twice. "Daniel?" My voice sounded smaller than I expected. No answer. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. A curtain in the living room was drawn shut, but I thought I saw it move, just slightly, like a breath from inside. I leaned closer, whispering, "Danny, it's Mom." Still nothing. That's when I noticed the mail. Stacked and yellowing by the door, envelopes damp with dew. 2 weeks worth? Maybe more. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel until that moment. Real fear.
I don't know how long I stood there, knocking, calling his name, listening for any sign of movement inside that house. The world felt hollow, like the air itself had stopped breathing. Then I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, a young woman stood at the edge of the path, holding a grocery bag against her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and tired. "Mrs. Hale?" she asked softly. "You're Daniel's mother, aren't you?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She introduced herself as Nora, the neighbor who'd moved in a few months ago. "I was starting to get worried too," she said, lowering her voice. "I haven't seen him lately, but I've heard things." "What things?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around the paper bag. "At night? Footsteps? Sometimes music? Once I thought I saw lights moving inside his room, but when I looked again, everything was dark." The words chilled me. Daniel lived alone. Nora glanced toward his house and whispered, "I didn't want to bother you. I thought maybe he just needed space." I forced a smile that didn't feel real. "Thank you, dear. I'll check on him." But as she walked away, I could feel her fear trailing behind her. Quiet, unseen, and horribly familiar. After Nora left, I stood there for a long moment, staring at Daniel's front door. My hands were shaking so badly I could hear the keys clinking against each other in my pocket. I still had the spare key, the one he gave me years ago, saying, "Just in case, Mom." It felt heavier than I remembered. When I finally slid it into the lock, it hesitated for a second before turning, as if the house itself was deciding whether to let me in. The door creaked open slowly, releasing a faint, sour smell, something between old paint and rain-soaked wood. Inside, the air felt colder. The curtains were drawn, and the light that filtered through them was weak and gray. Dust floated in the air, catching what little sunlight there was. His paintings were everywhere. Canvases leaned against the walls, half-finished portraits staring at me with empty eyes. Dark colors. Too dark. I never seen him paint like that before. On the table sat a single candle, melted nearly to the base, and beside it a cup of coffee gone cold. My heart squeezed at the sight. He'd been here, recently. "Daniel?" I called softly. The house didn't answer. It just listened. Then, from somewhere down the hallway, I heard it. A faint sound. A shuffle. Something moving. I froze where I stood. The sound was faint, like fabric brushing against wood, or something shifting in the dark. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe it was just the house settling, or maybe fear has its own sound when it gets too loud inside your head. But then it came again, a soft scrape, a quiet thump, from Daniel's bedroom. I followed the sound slowly, every step careful, afraid to break the silence that felt stretched thin across the walls. His door was half open. I pushed it gently and it gave a long, tired creak. The room smelled like turpentine and dust. Canvases leaned against the dresser, paintbrushes scattered across the floor. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled, the pillows on the ground. Then I heard it again, a faint rustle from under the bed. Daniel! My voice cracked when I said his name. I stepped closer, my knees trembling so hard I had to grip the footboard for balance. I knelt down slowly, heart hammering in my ears. For a second, I saw only darkness. Then movement. Something small. A tiny sound escaped, a weak, broken meow. My breath caught. There, in the shadows, was a small cage, and inside it, a trembling kitten staring up at me with wide, frightened eyes. For a moment, I couldn't move. The kitten's tiny body shivered with every breath, its fur matted, its eyes dull with hunger. My heart ached just looking at it. I reached out a trembling hand and whispered, "Oh, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" When I pulled the cage out, something else slid with it. A small notebook, its corners smudged with paint and dust. Daniel's handwriting covered the first page. My chest tightened at the sight of it. I opened it slowly. The first few pages were sketches, faces, hands, dark rooms, but the drawings grew stranger the further I turned. Shadows under beds, eyes staring through cracks in doors, and words, scrawled, frantic words. She calls me when the house sleeps. I can hear her from below. If I paint her, maybe she'll stop. My fingers went cold. Was Daniel losing his mind? Or was something in this house haunting him in ways I couldn't understand? I sat on the edge of the bed, the kitten still trembling in its cage beside me. The air felt heavier now, as if the walls were holding secrets I wasn't meant to find. Then I noticed the last page, a single line written shakily, almost like a plea. "Mom, if you find this, don't look under the bed again." I don't remember standing up. I only remember the sound of my heartbeat filling the room. That note, those words, "Don't look under the bed again," they wouldn't stop echoing in my head. I felt like the house itself was listening. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped the notebook. It fell open to the middle, and something slipped out. A torn photograph. Daniel and his wife Claire. They were standing by the lake near their old cabin, smiling. But the photo had been altered. Claire's face was scratched out, replaced with smeared paint, dark and violent. My knees gave out. I sat there on the cold floor, clutching that ruined picture, whispering his name. That's when I knew this was more than loneliness or grief. Something inside him had broken. I pulled out my phone and called the only number I could think of, the local police. My voice sounded small and far away as I told them my son was missing, that his house felt wrong. When Officer Grant arrived, I showed him the notebook. He read the pages quietly, his brow furrowed, his jaw tight. "This isn't new," he said finally. "We've had complaints from neighbors about noises, screams, even." I stared at him, cold spreading through me like winter. "What kind of screams?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "The kind that sound like someone begging for forgiveness." Officer Grant found the last clue before I did. Tucked between the final pages of Daniel's notebook was a small, water-stained receipt from a hardware store near Maple Lake, about an hour north of town. Scrawled across the back in Daniel's handwriting were just 3 words. "She's waiting there." The lake. That's where Daniel and Claire had their wedding photos taken, where they used to paint together on the old dock. It used to be a place filled with laughter. Now, even saying its name felt like touching a wound. Grant insisted on driving, though I barely heard his words. I just stared out the window as the trees blurred past, my hands clenched tight in my lap. Every turn of the road brought back pieces of Daniel's childhood. Him chasing dragonflies, skipping stones, calling out, "Watch me, Mom." When we reached the cabin, the sky was heavy with gray clouds. The front door was unlocked, the air thick with the smell of turpentine and rain. Inside, canvases leaned against every wall, dozens of them, all showing the same image. A woman standing in the lake, her reflection rippling, her face fading into shadow. And there, in front of the largest painting, sat Daniel, thin, pale, his eyes hollow. He turned toward me slowly, a weak smile trembling on his lips. "It's okay now, Mom. She's gone. I finished the painting." For a long moment, I couldn't move. Daniel sat there before the canvas, his hands covered in dried paint, his body trembling as though the air around him was too heavy to breathe. The woman in the painting, Claire, seemed almost alive, her eyes glistening with sorrow, her reflection fading into the dark water she stood in. I took a slow step toward him. "Danny, what have you done, sweetheart?" He looked at me, tears streaking through the dust on his face. "She wouldn't stop, Mom," he whispered. "I heard her at night, calling, crying. She wanted me to finish her, and when I did, she stopped." I knelt beside him and touched his face. His skin was cold, his heartbeat faint. I could feel the weight of his grief, years of it, pressing down between us. "Oh, my boy," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You don't have to carry her ghost anymore." He started to cry, soft, broken sobs that shook through my arms as I pulled him close. For the first time in years, he let himself be small again. My son, not a haunted man. Outside, the rain began to fall, gentle and steady, washing the world clean. The lake shimmered beneath the gray sky, the reflection of the painting trembling in its surface. When Daniel finally fell asleep in my arms, I whispered, "She's gone, love. It's over now. You're home." And for the first time in weeks, the silence felt kind.